Hello and welcome to The Higher Aim of Art. Alexandra Tyng is a realist painter whose work combines traditional methods with a contemporary viewpoint. Alex was born in Rome, Italy, and has lived in Philadelphia for most of her life. Primarily self-taught, Alex chose an academic education over art school. She learned traditional oil painting techniques by examining the work of the old masters, reading about methods and materials of other artists, and by watching artists paint. Alex's portraits incorporate descriptive backgrounds and a uniquely figurative sensibility. Her non-commissioned figurative work focuses on people in the process of living and interacting in their environments rather than in formal poses. In other paintings, the figures become distant focal points while the setting predominates. Alex's landscapes range from intimate views of particular places to mountaintop panoramas to large-scale aerial views of the glacially carved land formations of coastal Maine. Alex has had solo shows in New York, Maine, and Philadelphia. Her work is included in many public, corporate, and private collections in the United States and abroad. Alex is a member of the Maine Landscape Guild and the founder of Portraits for the Arts, an ongoing philanthropic project that uses the power of portraiture to raise money for the arts in the Philadelphia area. On Wednesday, May 22nd, Studio Unconventional was excited to welcome Alex to speak on visual storytelling.
Well, thanks everyone for coming today, and thank you, Dan, for inviting me. I think this lecture series is a wonderful addition to Studio Unconventional, and I'm really honored to be part of it. So, how many people have seen some of the other lectures? Oh yeah, so you know what it's like. I'm hoping I'm half as good as these other people. So, anyway, I guess we'll start. Let's just see the first slide. So, okay, so I'm just starting with my parents. My parents were architects, and my mother, Ann Tyng, and my father is Louis Kahn, and they both loved to draw, and so drawing was a part of our family. And my father especially, he drew with pencil, charcoal. He worked in pastel, and he worked in watercolor. He tried oils. I don't think he liked oils too much. So my mother liked just pencil. So we all drew things. And next slide. So my family was very unconventional for the time. I was born in the 50s. Today, there are a lot of different kinds of families. There are combined families, and families with unmarried parents, and families with same-sex parents, and all kinds of things. But at the time, there was the conventional family, and it was mother, father, and children, and it looked very much like the TV programs like Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver and all those things. And people tried to act like that, and they really did appear like that on the surface. So our family was visibly different, and my father had a wife that he stayed married to, and a daughter, my sister Sue, who was 14 years older than I, and then my mother and I are in the middle. And I was born in 1954, and then my brother was born in 1962, and that's him with his mother. And so I lived with my mother, he lived with his mother, and my father's nuclear family lived in their own house. And so, next slide. So that's me. I lived in a little house on Waverly Street in Philadelphia, and with my mom, and I was a happy child. Had lots of friends, and I loved drawing, and I think that was something that I loved to do, and my friends kind of, I think, bonded with me because I like to draw partially, and I thought of good ideas, so we had lots of imaginary games and things like that. Next slide. So my father he grew up really poor. He was an immigrant, and they lived in North Philly. They moved all the time, and they didn't have money for pencils or paper, good paper. So he used to burn sticks in the backyard and make charcoal so he could draw. So he really felt strongly that children should have, and probably everyone, should have good drawing materials so they could really enjoy drawing and expressing themselves. So he would buy blank books, bound books, and he would give me a book, and then I would fill it up with drawings, and then when it was filled, then he would give me another one, and I had to fill all the pages. So, and my mother would write down how old I was when I started the book and how old I was when I finished. So I had a really good, I still have these books, and I have a really good record of what I was drawing and what age. So I'll tell you what I was doing. So I was 22 months when I did this face, and notice there's no body, there's just, arms and legs sticking out of the face. I think it's kind of typical when we start drawing. And then I did the one on the right at 2, and I was drawing a body. So I don't know what happened between those 2 times, but next. But I liked people, obviously. A lot of kids do. But now, by this time I was 3, and this was a family. And I suspect my mother asked me, well, what happened to the father? And then I added him later, because a lot of my family drawings just have me and my mother in it. And the father's kind of standing a little bit away. So, and I remember not knowing how to draw a father very well. If somebody asked me to draw a man, I wasn't so sure. So, and I was also starting to draw in perspective. So something was going on with the bed and something on the floor. I don't really understand that. But I imagine that I was sick in bed, and my mother tried to take my temperature, and then I knocked her onto the floor. But I have no idea what actually happened there. But anyway, next slide. So then I was about 3 and a half, and I was really interested in perspective. And I loved to draw houses, and houses were just so interesting to me. I had this golden book of houses. I don't know if anyone else had that, but it had houses from all over the world, and they were all different shapes. And I would draw, that's a mother and daughter, and then I would also draw scenes of interiors in perspective, showing what was going on. And those were some cribs with babies in them, and patchwork quilts, and some lights hanging from the ceiling, and some slippers on a rug, and a chest of drawers or something. I remember drawing a lot of those.
How old?
3. Okay, next. Okay, and then this was a particular house, which was a special house to me. This was my grandparents' house. And my mother designed this part of the house, so it had a certain structure, and I was trying to draw the structure. You'll see it in a minute. And I was also trying to draw what was going on inside the house at the same time, and also what was going on in the water. And my mother's on the right. I can tell because she has a bun. So, and I was about 3 also. So, next slide. So, my grandparents, before I was born, my grandparents retired, and they moved to the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and they bought an old farmhouse, and they wanted my mother to design an addition to it. And they wanted it to look like the old farmhouse, but instead they got a space frame structure, which they were very happy with, actually. But this is the view from the water, and the people that lived there used to call it the ship, because it looked like a proud ship. Next slide. So this is the under construction of the addition. Under construction. And next slide. And then I just have really good memories of that time. And I loved my grandmother. My grandfather died when I was really young. I loved my grandmother a lot, and I played with my cousins, and my cousins built a tree house, and we used to play in the tree house. So it was really fun in the summer. And they basically built the addition so that all the grandchildren and their 5 children could stay in the house together and have lots of fun. So next slide. So I started to read pretty early, and I became a bookworm, and I read all kinds of things. And some of my favorite books were, and this is all about storytelling, so I'm going to talk about books too. But some of my favorite books were ones that dealt with time not being linear. And in one of them, the children could see into the future because they got a TV set that was put together wrong, and then a gypsy came and made it even more unusual, and then they were able to see things going on that nobody else could see, and it helped them solve a puzzle. And then the other one, the little boy comes to stay in this house. It's a 12th century house, and he sees the children that used to live there, and he interacts with those children. So those kind of stories really appealed to me, and they sparked my imagination. And I also loved mysteries, especially ones that involved an old house or a haunted house and some family secrets. I think I was really, not consciously, but I was somehow aware that my family, they didn't talk about everything that was going on, and I didn't really understand why my father didn't live with us. And I was never told that my parents' relationship ended when I was about 5, and I think no one thought to tell me because they weren't married in the first place. So, and my father didn't live with us, so nobody thought that I should know. So there were a lot of things that weren't talked about, and I didn't know how to ask. So, next slide. But I started to write books and illustrate them, and so this was my first. I was interested in writing, and I was also interested in art. And so I would write these manuscripts. I think I got to about page 20, and I had some tantrum, and my mother, and I threatened to tear it up, and when I went out of the room, it was gone when I came back, and I said, "Where did it go?" And she's like, "I don't know, I have no idea." And then when she died at 91, I found that manuscript in her stuff. She was so scared I was going to tear it up. So anyway, it was about a house there were 2 houses, and one got gradually more and more haunted over time, and then the other one, they were built at the same time by the same family, and the other one stayed nice, So I was always intrigued by why did some houses become haunted and other ones didn't? And did it become haunted first and the people left, or did the people left and then gradually it got worse and worse, and so, ghosts moved into it? I didn't know how this happened, and it was like this really intriguing thing. So I would write a lot of books and draw these houses, try to figure out what made them look haunted and all kinds of stuff. So, next slide. And I would also make what I call cut-throughs to show what was going on inside and what kind of life existed inside. And it's partly because my parents were architects and they would draw sections, and I'd see them draw sections. So I'd hear, okay, well, I'll draw a section. And I just called it a cut-through. I just remember that. So, okay, so next. And then these were some of my early, just a page from one of the early books. I don't remember who typed it. Maybe my mother typed it, I don't remember. But I think I was about 8 or 7, maybe. And it was, kids who were exploring. They went through the woods and they found this old house and they were trying to get in. So, okay, so next. So at the time, and if you remember, it was in the 60s, if those of you are old enough to remember, there were a lot of old Victorian houses around, in the cities and in the suburbs, and even just driving along a road in the country. And they're all dilapidated. A lot of them were dilapidated and deserted, and some of them had partially burned down. They were just kind of left there. And some of them were really elegant and beautiful. And I was really fascinated by those houses. I just kept wondering what kind of, what life had gone on in there, and why it had, why they were deserted. And, so it was the 60s, and modern architecture was really interesting, and nobody really wanted these hulks. So, but when I saw Charles Adams' drawings, I could tell that he kind of felt the same way about these houses, and he invented the people who lived in them, and I just thought it was so humorous to see, a drawing like this interior where, a regular person walked in, and the Adams family just thought everything was normal, and this guy was freaked out, and she'd say, "Lurch, take the luggage," and wondering why he's just standing there. I just loved his sense of humor. Next. And then my favorite illustrators were Beth and Joe Crush, and they still are. But Joe is still alive. He's 101, and they illustrated some of my favorite books from. You probably have read some of them, The Borrowers, and other books from the 50s, 60s, lots of different ones. But Gone Away Lake was one of my favorites because it involved a row of dilapidated, deserted Victorian houses along the edge of what used to be a lake. And the children discovered this, they were exploring and they discovered this place. And so, next slide. And then this was an interior of the houses when they were exploring the interior with their parents, and they ended up buying one of the houses and fixing it up, which was really exciting. But I loved how, the Crushes would draw the perspective. You saw two rooms, and there was a partition that was, cut through, so you could see this is the back door, and then the kitchen, and then you went through a doorway, and then you came out over there, and then there was another room over there, and then you could go back that way towards the stairway and the front door. So it was just so intriguing how, they could get so many rooms into that one drawing and show all these details. I just love that, and I copied their style so much. You'll see, you'll see what I did. Next. So I was also, going to museums and doing things, and with my mother and with my friends. But just as a kid, I'd see Edward Hopper's paintings, and I really loved how he could bring out personality in a house. I notice a lot of this is about houses, but you'll see why later. But I love that. And next, also Andrew Wyeth. I was very conscious of his work pretty early on, and I also think he was able to create this personality and feeling in, even the same house under different conditions could have a very different feeling. And that's the Kerner house. Next. So when I was about 12, I discovered the Morris Arboretum. How many of you have been there? A lot of people. Okay, so, well, some of you, yeah. It's a really nice place now, but at the time, I loved it much more because it was still like an old estate, and you still felt that the house was up on the hill in the middle of the estate, and you could, it was a little overgrown, and, they did mow the lawn and everything, but it just had this feeling of an old estate that was overgrown, and that's exactly what it was. It was owned by the University of Pennsylvania, and the Morrises had given it to the university, I think in 1930-something, I think. But the old house was just sitting there and nobody was using it. It's really a pity, but it got torn down. And now they really don't have a big enough facility, I think. They should have kept the house. But they had made that decision because they said they didn't have enough money to keep up the grounds and the house. And they weren't making any effort to fundraise. But anyway, we discovered this house, my friends and I, and we just couldn't wait to go there. I mean, it was just so intriguing. And next slide. Okay, this was the interior. We actually got in one day because we saw there was a window that was open on the ground floor, and we snuck in. Did you do that? Oh, that's right, you did. Yes. So that's right. Yeah, we were talking. And you remember this then, right? Yeah. Yeah. We went through every inch of it. It was so interesting. They had taken out a lot of like the leaded glass and the tile and things, but you could see pretty much how it was. And it was pretty interesting. It was a really large mansion. Next. And so you can see the Morris house worked its way into some of my illustrations. And my friends and I kept on going with these books. We wrote them, and I got my friends to help me because I really didn't want to write the books. I realized I wanted to illustrate them more than write them, so it was fun to have a joint effort. writing them, and we could talk about, who was going to write what, and then I got to make a lot of illustrations, so it was kind of an excuse to make an illustration. But we had an imaginary family that continued into our teenage years. It was kind of an excuse to write, but it was also a group of friends that we had, and we were just friends anyway, so we just kept on doing it. Next. And we were, in this story, the kids were fixing up the inside of the Morris kitchen. Putting back the stained glass and stuff. Next. And then these are just some more illustrations with interior scenes and things. Next. School room. Next. Keep going. So, and then in my early 20s, I'm kind of skipping around a little bit with time, but in my early 20s, my friend and I, she was a really good writer, and we decided to team up and write books and try to get them published. We never got anything published, but I always loved to do the cover, the art, and so this one was Devil's Trouble, and it was about, it was based on the idea of this, that unhaunted house and the haunted house was coming back. And these are actual twin houses. I think it's on like 11th and Spruce or 12th and Spruce, something like that. And I think they're still there. But they're all fixed up now. Probably really a developer was probably holding on to that one that's all, wrecked up and waiting for a good time to sell it or fix it up. But in my mind, I thought, well, what mysterious force made this one haunted and the other one not haunted? I couldn't figure that out. The obvious answer just wasn't clear to me at all. So, then, it developed into a plot. It was fun. So, next. These are just a couple more illustrations of houses. Next. Another one. So next. Okay, so my mother, when I was about 3, she got interested in Jungian psychology, and she went through Jungian analysis, and became a founding member of the C.G. Jung Center of Philadelphia. And at the time, it started in this carriage house home of her friend who was an artist, and the meetings were held in her downstairs art studio. And so my mother would just take me and I would draw or whatever while they were meeting. And so I listened with one ear to just, lectures on symbolism and fairy tales and archetypes. And so this kind of just got into my brain, and I became interested in it. And as I got older, I listened more and more to the things that were being talked about, and it just made a lot of sense to me. So I became very interested in Jung, and I started reading some things. And I wasn't, what do you call a scholar, but I just kept on reading what I was interested in. And so both of my parents, they would talk about some ideas like archetypes and things, and in terms of architecture. So, there was some dinner table conversations occasionally on that. Next. And so, meanwhile, my family, so I was solving some of these mysteries in my family. So starting with when I got into high school and on through high school, I started wondering why I didn't know any of my 2 siblings. And, and my brother lived in Chestnut Hill, and I lived in Philadelphia. And I sometimes saw my father's wife, but I really never crossed paths with my sister. And by the time I was a senior in high school, she lived in New York and was married and had a career. And so I decided I was going to meet them. And so I called up my sister, and I told her, I really wanted to come to New York and meet her, and she was really excited. And she said, yeah, I was waiting for you to be old enough to call me because I didn't want to just intrude on your life, but please come see me. So we met each other, and it was great. And then I called my brother's mother and I asked if I could meet my brother, and she said, oh, she's delighted. And she said, yeah, come on over. So I met my siblings, my junior and senior year, I guess, of high school. And this is me at my high school graduation. My brother came, my father was there, and my mother and my brother's mother were all there. Aside, in addition to other people. But so by that time we knew each other. So next. So when my grandmother sold her house, she got too old to stay in her house. She moved to a retirement community, and we started to go to Maine. And it was about 35 years total. We rented, and later me with my kids rented, and my husband and kids rented a this beautiful camp on desert island, and that became really ingrained in my imagination and my creativity, and I just produced a lot of work that around this place in different ways. Like the interiors and exteriors became backgrounds for a lot of paintings, and so it's in my soul. Next. And also it turns out that my brother and his mother owned an island down the coast a little bit with a lighthouse on it, and it was a completely different piece of Maine, and it was really fun to visit them too. So I call those two places my two Maine worlds. And they're very different in color, the light and the colors and everything. So, and that's me sketching. That was after high school, and with my friend Linda and my brother. We had just gone swimming, so that's why we were kind of half dressed. So, next. Okay, so then I went to college, and I went to Harvard, and they did not have a very good art department. It was very small, and so they put art history and art together, and it's called fine arts. So I majored in fine arts, and it was a good major for me because I loved history, and learning history through art and architecture was just great for me. I loved doing that, and I learned so much about paintings of different eras, and it was just fascinating because you had to go to the museum when you wrote a paper because you had to see the paintings in person. And so, I walked in my first time at the Boston Museum. I walked into this room with this painting, and it's about 8 feet square, and it just took my breath away. And I know I've talked about it in other, talks that I've given. For different reasons, it was an amazing painting. I talked about the air and the atmosphere and the color and everything. But for tonight's purpose, I'm just going to mention the composition and the relationship between the four sisters. So it really impresses me because it's like a psychological study of these four sisters. And I'm not sure how much he knew about them, and how much he just intuited. So the two sisters that are in the background, there's a darker space, so the lighting is a little subdued. And one sister is only viewed in profile, and she's in deep shadow. And then there, the two sisters that are younger are in the foreground. And the grouping, these two sisters are very close together, these are farther apart, and then there's a lot of empty space, and then there's a red, thing there, and it's interesting to know that later, I think at least two of the sisters that are in the background suffered from mental illness, and it's just interesting how he just grouped these girls together in certain ways, or separated them in certain ways, or had them facing certain ways, and expressed so much, not only just individually, but their relationships with each other. And that's something that when you think about painting a figure painting that has more than one figure in it, you've got to think of the relationships between them as well as the individual personalities that you're painting. So, next. And the other favorite group of, I guess, just the type of painting, type of art that I love is 17th century Dutch painting, and that really made a big impression on me, probably because the professor was so great. But Jan Steen was not my favorite in terms of color and atmosphere and light and things, but I love to show this because it's later when I worked on multi-figure compositions, I realized how much I had gotten from paintings like this. It's a christening scene, and a lot of Dutch painting was at this time period was very contemporary to the time period, and the scenes were just regular kind of family or different types of genre scenes, and they also had symbolism embedded in them. And people of that time period, they kind of knew what the symbols meant. So it was like a message to people. And so this was a christening scene, and it just looked like a nice family kind of gathered together. But there are symbols in there, like for instance, this woman that's sitting down in the foreground. She's warming her feet on a brazier, and it's under her skirt, which is a symbol of moral looseness. So she's lolling against this guy behind her, and she's holding out her glass to get more wine or whatever it is, and she's probably a little tipsy, and she's anyway. And then there's obviously people indulging in different ways, but this guy that has the pipe, he's offering a smoke to the to kids, and obviously they're too young to smoke. And it's just what it means is as the old saying, so pipe the young. So if you're doing something as an adult, you're modeling your behavior for the next generation. So this innocent child is being christened. If it will turn out to be like the older people, and whatever if you're going to model good behavior, your kids will turn out good, and if you don't, your kids will just turn out like that. So and it's your choice. So and then even the animals have there's symbols of things, like the dog is a symbol of loyalty and obedience, and the parrot is a symbol of that, whatever that word is, symbol of a mimicry. So there's all kinds of symbols in the painting. And I love that way of putting symbols in. You probably see it in my work a little bit. But I like, the combination of just the very contemporary scene that you can just read, for face value, and then, putting in things that people can discover in the painting. Next. Okay, so this is the first and only, for a long time, figure painting that I did after I graduated from college, and I went to grad school, and then I joined a cooperative gallery. I was painting landscapes, and I was doing some portraits, and I had a day job, and I was selling some work. And this was the one painting I attempted to show a concept. And my skills were not highly developed at the time. There were no ateliers. You can go to art school, so please excuse the rather primitive style. But I got this reaction from, I can't remember, somebody came into the gallery, and I had this piece, and he said, I think it was a person who was in a gallery, who ran a gallery, and he said, you can't sell this kind of work in a gallery. Nobody will show this kind of work. Nobody shows figurative work. And he said it's too sincere and honest, and it has to have some edge to it. It has to have some irony or something, and I became really embarrassed by my attempt at honesty and to reveal anything in myself. So I didn't do any more of that work for a really long time. And I didn't even know, because not going to art school, I wasn't in touch with other artists, and I didn't realize that there were some artists in New York that were showing figurative work, and it wasn't all ironic. It was some, some different types of work. So anyway, but I'm just showing you that because I was really interested in doing this kind of work early on, and then I stopped doing it for a long time. Next.
Alex,
So,
were those two paintings or one painting?
they're two paintings, yeah, they're two separate paintings, but they're meant to be hung together, yeah. Okay, next. Okay, so this is Diane Feisel in 2010. And I'm kind of skipping around time-wise. I skipped a whole bunch of time because I did a lot of landscapes and portraits during that time, and I'm trying to show work that is more towards figurative, not straight portraiture. So I'm skipping a lot of time. And so I started to, after painting I paint a lot of commissioned portraits, and I think I hint at stories and things about people in the portraits, but with my personal work, I was trying to put a little bit more into it. And this portrait is really, it's also expressing an idea, which is how an idea flows from your head, through your body and out through your hand when you're painting. And I saw her braid as a brush, kind of a brush. So, and also we were in South Carolina for a while, and there were these marshes that reminded me of Diane's hair. And then we went back to Tinicum, and we were going to pose in the marsh, and then I just liked this background better, so I ended up using this setting. But next. And another friend of mine who's an artist, these are all artists actually, and her mother had just died, and she was kind of thinking about her, reassessing what was important to her in life. And she loves water, and she loves kayaking, and I just saw her as being kind of at sea, but also rooted. And so I was trying to express that. And I put her dog in. Well, a symbol of loyalty, obedience. I'm not so sure. Anyway, next. And this is Nancy B. Miller, and we were on Mohegan and painting, and she was thinking of going back to get her MFA at the time. And so we had this discussion about what makes star quality in art and what makes you an art star. We were just kind of talking about it idly, and I started thinking of her in this setting and thinking about, what if she found a starfish at the edge of the sea, and it's just, the water just, threw it onto the land, and she had this star in her hand, and what was she going to do with this star? Was she going to use it? Was she going to and so, that's kind of like how artists are. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, So, anyway, next. So, I'm just throwing this in because I love Cecilia Beaux, but also, this is a really good example, I think, of a two-person painting. It is a portrait, but it's something more than a portrait. It shows the relationship between mother and son. And also, two-figure paintings are really hard to do because there has to be a focal point. There has to be something your eye looks at first. But if you want the figures to be relatively equal in importance, it's really tricky. So, it takes a lot of thought to create a composition that works. So next. So these are all two people portraits, but there's a little bit of a story in them. So I'm kind of getting towards back towards telling stories. So this is the Plaster Craftsman, and it's father and son. And it did get into the finals in the Portrait Society. I was very excited about that. So, and so there's a little bit of their relationship. I tried to show their relationship next. And this is Claude and Pamela Frank. They're both well-known musicians and father and daughter. And they played Mozart for me while I was working on a portrait I was sketching. And I took some photos, and I didn't realize later, but they never play for people. And I was very naive in asking them to play, but they agreed to do it. So, and the music was so amazing. I just wanted to make the feeling of music in the air, between them. But that was a difficult composition because in the middle, there's just the air, but I wanted to feel it bouncing around, the music bouncing around between them. Next. So I think I was getting a little more towards, away from a portraiture and towards trying to figure out figure painting. And one thing I thought about was the balance between the setting and the figures. And I didn't want it to be a landscape, and I plopped in a few figures to make a focal point. That I never would do that because it's just a device. And I also didn't want it to be a portrait that just had a background. So I wanted the two things to be inseparable and work together. And so this is teamwork. And I also didn't worry about making it flattering. I didn't have to worry about that. And of course they complained, but I had painted them before, so it was okay. I got away with it. And at about this time, I was working on a big chart with my friend Linda Brandon, who's an artist in Arizona, and we made a list of all the figurative painters we knew, and we made a chart with their names on the side, and then all these different criteria on the other, axis, and then we made descriptive evaluations of all the different criteria to try to figure out how figurative paintings differed from portraits. And I know it sounds crazy because you look at them and you can kind of tell, but when you're trying to make a transition, as I was, from portraiture to figure painting, I really wanted to examine other people's work and figure out what made it look like a figure painting, because sometimes I would make something that I thought looked like one, and somebody would say, that's more of a portrait, So I think it was an interesting exercise. Next. So around that time, around 2008, 2010, something like that, I was thinking about painting my family, using my family members as characters in scenes that I imagined, I created myself to express issues in our family or situations or questions or problems or, just things I'd been thinking about for a long time. And it took a lot of thought, and I made a lot of sketches and thought about it a lot. But there were things that were holding me up, and I think that there were kind of voices in my head that were negative voices. And one of them was that, it had to do with my brother's film. He had made a film about our father a few years before I started thinking about this, and maybe about the same time, but it hadn't really developed too far at that point. And so by the time I really started thinking about it, my father became famous not just among architects, but he was famous among people who weren't architects. And so what I was afraid of is that people would think that I was trying to cash in on my relationship with him if I painted him in a painting. But I am so wedded to the person. I didn't want to use a model for somebody to represent somebody else. I wanted to use the actual person. And that's just how I am. I'm very literal that way. So the other thought in my head was, holding me back, was I was afraid that the facial recognition and the name, that people, if they looked at a painting that I did and he was in the painting, that people would say, oh, isn't it the architect Louis Kahn? And instead of saying, oh, this is the father in the painting, or this is the patriarch, or he's representing this, thing. And I didn't want them to be distracted by knowing who he was. So I wasn't sure I would get the message across if people were just identifying, the person and taking it really literal. So, and then I think the biggest problem I had, the loudest voice in my head, was just not realizing that I could actually paint my family, because when I was growing up, my brother and I were told to go back to the back of, the room and sit in the back. If my father were being honored or something, we were told to sit in the back. And then at my father's funeral, we were told to sit in the back. A lot of these things happened, and people treated us differently. And I became more and more aware of that as I got older. So I guess they behaved in a way that they thought my father would want them to behave, but actually they never got a cue from him at all. They were really getting a cue from his wife, and so it was not really clear how my father wanted, and he didn't set an example of how he wanted us to be treated. So people were just going by some kind of convention. And, I don't blame them, but they didn't really have any guidance. So it took me a while to realize that I could actually paint my family, and that I had my story to tell, and I had a right to do it. So that it took a while. So next. So this was approaching figurative work, I think. It still has a little bit of a look of a portrait, but I was trying to show, this is of my brother, and I was trying to show, it started out as the difference between how he was as a young man, trying to get in, and then as a middle-aged man, just being in, but being sort of feeling a little trapped. And I realized that, that feeling, it sort of goes beyond that, middle-aged and, young, but it happens when you want something really badly, and then you get it, and then maybe you're not so happy, or you realize like maybe you feel like you want out, or there's always that sort of duality in relationships and just with everything. But it's definitely a characteristic of my brother. So I was trying to paint that, but I was kind of hoping it would resonate, and I'm not sure it actually got across, but I was working on it. So next. Okay, so the first painting that I felt really was hitting a mark, I guess, was this one, The Wish. So it was 2012 by this time, I thought it was really large at the time. It's not really that large. It's probably as large as it's shown on the screen. And it started when I went to my brother's mother's 80th birthday party, and I took lots of pictures, and there was one that I particularly liked of her blowing out the candles and on her cake. And then I realized I had this picture of my mother at her 80th birthday blowing out her candles, and I suddenly put the two images in my mind together, and I saw them blowing out the candles on this big cake, and they're blowing towards each other and creating this firestorm in the middle of the cake. And I thought, oh my God, what are they wishing for, And then I saw my father's head pop out. So I thought, well, okay, so that's the beginning of this painting. And then I realized, if they're wishing for him to come out of come back to life, then everybody should be there, So, I'm mixing time periods, putting people together that never even met each other. And my mother and my brother's mother are both 80 in the picture, but they're really actually not the same age. And so, everybody's like all together, and they're wishing, but there's a lot of other wishes going on around them. The next slide. This is an example of the detail. So my son has type 1 diabetes, and so he wished for a cure. I asked everybody what they wished for. So, he wished for a cure, so I have his kit there in front of him. And then my brother has a wishbone. So I don't have a picture, but I don't have a detail, but my daughter has a dried up chestnut that she picked up when she was on Sarama, which is where my father was born, and it is a good luck thing, and you can wish on, you can hold it and wish something. So so they're all different kinds of things, and if you can go back one slide again, the whole setting is a wish because we were not able to go back to that same house in Maine, and so I wished for our own house on the lake, which hasn't come true yet, but the whole setting was a created, I imagine, room. And the things on the walls are, symbolic of different things. And then my grandparents are in the picture on the left, so they're included in the painting. So anyway, okay, so then we can advance to, I guess, okay. So I just threw that in because this is a birthday party that I drew when I was 3.5, and the people are sitting there and there's a birthday cake and stuff. So it's kind of interesting how those themes just keep continuing through your life. I'm sure a lot of kids draw these things. I'm just throwing it for fun. But okay, next. So another group of people around the table, and this one's called Royalty. And Royalty is a card game. Does anyone know how? Does anyone here know how to play Royalty? No. Okay. So it's a card game. It's a word game, and each card usually use 2 decks because it makes it more fun. But each card has a letter on it, and you get a hand of 7 cards, and you can make whatever words you can make with your cards. You lay down. It's your turn. You lay them down on the table, and then the next person can, if they can add letters to your word, they can get points for that, the whole word again, but it has to change the meaning of the word. And then they also can put down other words that they can make with their hand, and then it just keeps going around the table. And then if nobody touches your word, you can take it at the end before your next turn. So you get points for making words, you get points for taking cards, and there's just different ways you can make points. So the woman on the left is Nan, my friend, and she appears in other paintings. She's the one that taught me how to play Royalty. She's much better at it than I am. And she's keeping score. But at this time, it's the card game, the words that people are spelling, and you can see some of the words in their hands, all have to do with copyrights and rights. And so at the time, my brother and I were looking into, and actually my sister too, we were looking into my father's, the agreement at my father's death, the contents of his office was bought by the state of Pennsylvania, and then it was given to the University of Pennsylvania as custodians, and that was the start of the architectural archives at Penn. So but there was a question about whether the copyrights on that, because it says all his work, whether that extended to his personal drawings and paintings, which were not in the office at the time of his death, but they weren't found by the people, the lawyers, or they weren't listed, but they were in his office when he died. So they were taken out of his office and then they reappeared later. And without going into too much detail, but my sister now owns all those drawings and paintings. So there was a question of, my brother owns some, and I own like a few. Okay, so, but the ones that I have, they were not from that. We had them before that time. So we had them when he was still alive. So we know, we just didn't know who had the copyright. And so this whole thing, the words that were, it's like a discussion about copyright. And, I'm putting down, can you turn it to the next one? I think it's okay. So I'm putting down quality, and I have a wild card. And my brother, you can't see it, but my sister has the words for copy. So, and then there are other ones my brother laid down, and I think it says something like right or something. But she also has in. So she could put in and make inequality would change the word, and she could get points for it. So there are all these things going on. And if you looked at the real painting and you saw everything that's going on, then you don't know what my brother's going to lay down because you can't see what he's going to put down because he's hiding his cards. But we could go around, and it's all about it's like a discussion. Okay, so next slide. And then my brother's girlfriend, Susan, was in this one, and we were in Germany, by the way. My father had an exhibit that traveled through Europe, and we were in southern Germany, and we were talking at this table at a restaurant, and these guys came up, and they were really, very, like beer drinking Bavarian guys, and they were like, they looked at us and we looked up that expression, and it meant, we got your number, we know what you're up to. We have our eye on you, and not in a very good way, So she's doing that to the viewer, And I don't know if you can see the model ship up over the fireplace, but it's the Atocha, which is the ship that sunk off Mexico, I think off the coast of Mexico, and it had some kind of treasure in it, and there was a discussion about who owned the treasure. Who was it, the government, or was it the treasure hunters or something? I forget exactly what happened. But there are all these little things in the painting, just like Dutch painting. Next. This one. Am I talking too much about the paintings? You want to just look at them? Okay. So art and legacy. It's about the same sort of similar. Subject as the copyrights, but in this one I'm focusing on my father's artwork, which was missing from the office, I'm trying not to be negative in these paintings. I'm trying to, I'm honest about how I feel, but I also feel like I love my family, so I'm not trying to trash anybody. I'm trying to see things from different people's viewpoints. So I'm looking at it from my father's viewpoint. He's in the ivory tower, and I like to use this lighthouse. It's kind of fun to use because, depending on what's going on with the weather, a lot of things happen. Like in this one, the glass is kind of milky because it's got some fogginess on it. It's early morning, and so he's painting, and some of his watercolors and pastels are in the lighthouse tower, so it's kind of like his ivory tower, and he's painting, and there are 3 flowers in the glass, and they represent our 3 mothers. There's an aster, which stands for Esther. There's a goldenrod, which reminds me of Harriet because she's so sunny and a real people person and down to earth. And then the Queen Anne's lace is from my mother's exam. So, but he's using that as his watercolor, which is kind of typical. And he's just working away, and he's not really conscious of us. And it's sort of like, I'm thinking about myself too, being an artist, you don't think about what's going to happen to your work when you die. I mean, maybe we do sometimes, but we just want to keep working, and we don't want to be bothered by those things. And my father was really that type of person. He just didn't want to be bothered by thinking about what was going to happen to the work. And so, I have some sympathy for him, not wanting to worry about it. And he kept promising people, oh yes, you can have my drawings, and oh yes, you can have my drawings, and so a lot of people were promised the drawings, but he didn't actually say, this person gets these drawings, this person gets this drawing, So, his will said everything went to his wife. So it all went to his wife. So we're all looking at it from our different points of view. We all looking through a different window, and we all have our viewpoint. So that's and then this one. This was my one attempt at a triptych, and I'm a little less happy with working that way. But it's about my brother and his relationship with our father, and and he's a filmmaker, so he kind of thinks in a cinematic way. And so when we talk about our projects, he's always saying, oh, then you can have this happen, and then you can have that happen, and then you can have that. Like, wait a minute, I have to put this in one image, and it's got to be, distilled. And, he's like, oh, yeah, right, of course, and then, and I probably do the same thing to him. I say things in a different way, and he has to translate, But we love to talk about our projects with each other. But, so he was kind of talking about the symbolism of, King Arthur and castles and knights and things. And so there are all those symbols in the two outer sections, and then the middle section is like, way later in time, and we can advance the slide. It just shows the middle section. So after my father, this is way after my father died, but he's kind of looking back and trying to think about, he's using the chess set as kind of a play therapy or like sandbox play, not as a game, but kind of reenacting his death. He's the white king that's flipped over, and then, thinking about his childhood when he saw his mother as the good queen and my father's wife as the bad queen, and, so it's, he's kind of reenacting that and thinking about it, and he's got a pawn and a knight in his hand. I mean, yeah, is that right? Yeah. So he's kind of thinking like, was I just a pawn, and was I, I was trying to be a knight, but maybe I wasn't, really old enough. And anyway, just kind of contemplating that. Next. And this one, New World. So my mother died in 2011, and I started thinking about a lot of paintings that I wanted to do that involved her. And I thought about how she must have felt when I was born. I was born in Italy, and she went there to have me and stay with her brother. So she was kind of out of the way because it was back in the 50s. And she wanted to save my father embarrassment. So she was offered a Fulbright. She got a Fulbright, and she refused the Fulbright because she was pregnant. So she decided she was going to study at the American Academy of Rome, and then she decided to go anyway. So she traveled around, and then when she had me, she stayed with her brother, and then she came back. I think I was like 9, 10 months old or something. And so I tried to imagine what it was like to come back and, live in that time period in our country as an unwed mother and single mother. And, I thought, she might not know where she's going. And so I used a pea pod dory because it is the same at both ends, and you can't tell which one's the front and which one's the back. I mean, there is no front or back, and she may not know where she's going. So, I just wanted her just drifting a little bit and not knowing what to do next. And in the background is the coast of Mount Desert Island, and I put that there because her and my ancestors on that side settled on Mount Desert Island, and she loved the island. So even though she was from Boston, but I wanted to put that in the background. So and then next, and then this is just an example, but there's the transitions don't really show up, that they're much smoother, and I see like the transitions looking really funny, like on her cheek and everything, but in real life they're much smoother. So it's kind of a little disturbing to see the jumpy looking things. But anyway, just the apple. I'm just going to discuss the apple because I don't want to discuss everything. But it could just be an apple that you eat. But it also could be the garden, we could refer to the Garden of Eden and the original sin, or if you're not so moralistic, it could be the tree of knowledge, and when you eat it, your consciousness is raised, and you can't go backwards, So, but there's also a personal symbolism that I saw in the apple, which is that my mother's, one of her favorite ancestors is Anne Hutchinson, who believed she was kind of a religious rebel, and she believed in direct revelation. She didn't believe that you needed to be told what the word of God was by a church elder. She said you could know that yourself and know, and listen directly. And she taught Bible study groups to women in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and she was kicked out of the Massachusetts Bay Colony because she was so, different. And so my mother really admired her a lot, and when she came to America from England, she brought, this is Anne Hutchinson, she brought seeds from her apple tree in England, and she planted them in the New World. So that was about that. So, okay, next. So, this one, again, sort of around the same time period, and I thought about my relationship with my mother, and the time period when my parents broke up, and nobody told me that they broke up. And so my father kind of receded from our little family circle a little bit, but since he didn't live with us, I wasn't supposed to notice anything, I guess, I don't know. But I think I did notice, because of looking at my drawings. And so this is kind of like, it's a self-portrait in a way. It's like, my world. It's how I saw things, and my parents became sort of peripheral in a way when I was drawing, because I was so focused on what I was doing. And we lived on a small street, Waverly Street, in town in Philadelphia, and kids would draw on the street with chalk all the time. So, a car would come by every once in a while, and it was going so slowly, plenty of time to get out of the way. So there was always a lot of drawings on the street. And it's also inspired a little bit by the Scarlet Letter. And how many of you read the Scarlet Letter in high school? Some of you? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, it may be like a certain time period, where everybody had to read it. I don't know. But I was really, so those of you who haven't read it probably not know what I'm talking about. But the main characters in the story, this Hester Prynne, who committed adultery with this minister who was hiding the fact that he was the father of this little girl, Pearl, were living in this town, and she was supposedly married to somebody else, but somehow, I don't know if she left her husband, I don't know what happened, but I can't remember, but the daughter, definitely acted as though she knew, she could tell that something wasn't right, and her parents would, her mother would try to get her to talk to her father, and she, of course, it was not said that it was her father, and she just wouldn't respond, you could tell she knew something was off, and she said, well, I'll only do that if I think they were in the woods or something, and she said, I'll only sit with him if he walks back to town with us, and of course that was not going to happen because he didn't want to be seen with them, and so, and then that night there was a portent in the sky, and there's this big red letter A that appeared in the sky, and that was kind of like, a foreshadowing of his death of a heart attack, and my father died of a heart attack. So it was like I was reading my family story. It was really kind of freaky. Yeah, so I put a lot of letters in the drawings, and one of the big letter A's pointing right at my father, who's standing down straight a bit. And there's another one, go forward a little bit, and my mother's dress. And that again is like very, this paint strokes don't look like that close up, but you can kind of see she really had a dress like that, but I exaggerated the seams so they went down and made the rest of the A. Because Hester Prynne had to wear a letter A on her bodice because she was an adulteress, and she embroidered the letter to make it really beautiful, and she always wore it. So that's where that comes from. Sorry. Next. So I'm trying to throw in a little bit of my process. So I start with usually with a concept sketch, and it's very, very rough. This was extremely rough, but just to show you, kind of how I get started, trying to picture how I want the painting to look. Next. And then I scanned a lot of drawings, and I put them together like a collage, and then next I stretched them in Photoshop onto the perspective of the street. And that's one of the few times I've ever done that. I usually don't use Photoshop for that kind of thing. But I just wanted to get a general idea of what the drawings would look like. And they don't really look, if you go back to the painting, it's not the same, but it just gave me some idea of where to start. So you can go back again to that. Okay, next. This is Point of Turning, and I'm still working with the family dynamics and everything, but it's more personal to my brother and his mother, and go forward one more. And yeah, so this is a 6x9 inch little painting that I did for the Portrait Society. It's like a fundraiser thing where it's like a mystery sale, and you don't know who the artist is, and everybody paints something. So, and I thought, I really like that. I think I might make a painting out of it, but I don't know what's happening. I just kind of like the shadows, I like the gas flames and stuff. So let's go back to the painting. But then I was also working. Is there water? Did you get here? Oh, is that water?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice. I don't want to put my mouth on this, but whatever. I'll just drink from here. Next. Can I keep it up here for now? Is that okay? Okay. So, excuse me. So I was also working on another painting of my brother, and he was looking up, and somebody was coming through the door, and it just wasn't working. And then I thought, and it's the same room, same perspective, because that's kind of where you can stand to get the scene in there. I thought, well, what if I just put them together? What will happen? And it was like, pow, this thing was happening, between them, like they're staring at each other and kind of giving each other this look. And, I realized this moment when your parent, she starts to become dependent on you for something, and he's doing her finances, and then she's cooking for him, and she's kind of holding on to her territory, So, but it's like that turning point. And so I have a lot of things on the table that are, that relate to that, but I just had to put a dreidel on the table because it means point of turning. And, depending on where it lands, you don't know how it's going to land, and so you could get different results. So I kind of like that. You don't know what's ahead of you. Next. Oh, next. So I realized that, I'm still painting my family, but the focus was getting a little bit different. It was going into time and examining the anomalies of time, and how you can express different time periods. And so and my own experience of time is not exactly linear, which I'll explain a little later, but there's synchronicity, which I was very familiar with. So two things or three things could happen at the same time, and they're not causing each other, but they just happen, and they're kind of meaningfully connected. And the famous example is, this man dies, and then his clock stops at the same time. It's a very famous example. Or say his favorite dog dies 2 minutes later, or something like that. So these things are not caused by each other, but they're meaningfully connected. And then also I found this great quote by Lewis Carroll. It's a poor sort of memory that only works backwards. And I thought, yeah, because my memory works forwards. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So next. So when I was about 5, I was at my grandparents' house, and in the old part of the house, in the farmhouse part. And my mother told me to go upstairs and get something. Like we were going to the shore, I guess like my towel or something. And so I started upstairs, and I got about 2 steps up, and I looked up, and the whole second floor hallway was like filled with flames. It was just like fire, the whole hallway. And you know, I just was like, oh, I can't go up there. There's fire up there. And my mother's looking, she's like, there is no fire up there. Go upstairs and get whatever it was. And so this went on, and you know, I was so stubborn. She's like, all right, I'll go up with you. And she made me walk first down the hallway to my room. And I was just like going down the hallway, and I said, this house is going to burn down. And she said, that's nonsense. That is ridiculous, you know. And I just remember this whole thing. And many years later, I was 20 years old. My mother, I was probably in college, and I was home for the holidays or something, and she came in to my room, and she said, the house in Maryland burned down. And this, my grandmother had sold it already, so other people were living there. But I said, oh, so that's what that was. And she's like, what? And she was like really upset because she had a terrible year. My father died, my grandmother died, all these things happened to her. And then the house burned down, and she wanted me to be sympathetic. And all I could think of was, this thing happened, you know, and I reminded her of what happened. She didn't even remember. I just told her that what happened. She had no memory at all of it. So this is not a literal, you know, recreation of that exact thing, but what I'm trying to show is that, you know, I'm offering this like globe, like a crystal ball thing with fire in it, and my mother does not want any part of it. And it's like this sort of disconnect between me and my mother that I felt often, that she didn't get into my head at all in certain ways, and in many ways, but that was one of them. We didn't understand each other. We were close, but we didn't understand each other very well. So, and that's often true. But so I was trying to show that thing, and also refer to it was, you know, a memory of the first time that I saw the future, and there's also a lot of other things going on because that was painted, or it was designed right after my mother died, and so I was very aware of like impermanence and death and things, and so, and also the 2 people who died that were important at the same time that the house burned down. I had these footsteps walking between us and to this boat, which I kind of thought of as, you know, Charon when the river Styx, kind of, you know, rowing somebody out to the water, which was behind us. And also the shore of Maryland gets worn away, like it gets eroded, maybe like 5 feet a year. It's very fragile, and so, you know, it's like this feeling that nothing is permanent, and any storm could, you know, erode some more, and there's a storm coming, and you know, I tried to foreshadow the fire in the house a little bit, and just a little bit. I didn't want to get too dramatic, you know. And I thought about having like painting the fire starting, and I thought, no, that's just could be really corny. I don't want to do that. So, you know, there's a lot going on, but it's not meant to be obvious. So, okay. So next. I dug it up, actually. I dug it up out of the sand. Yeah. I could be burying it. Could be burying it. That's true. Yeah. In fact, I think that was a reference to the other painting, too. Now that I can't remember that, whether it was or not. I think it might have been. Yeah. So, okay. Next. And then this was another painting in which I was exploring different ideas of time. And that's my husband, Steve, and so we were traveling down to Maryland. We took a couple of trips down there. I was trying to get reference material for the painting before this, And, we found the spot where my grandparents' house used to be, and there was a kind of a 70s colonial style, ranch house that wasn't very interesting, and a plastic picket fence. And he said, I just can't, it was so different from what he thought it was going to be. He said, I just can't imagine it. I wish I could just see it for just a minute, I wish I could just go back in time for a minute and just see it. And I thought, well, that would be an interesting painting. What if you really could do that? What if reality just kind of shifted and shimmered, and then it just appeared for a minute, and then, you could see it. So I had a lot of fun with that, and then I got really involved with the dashboard and the navigational tools and everything. And what ended up being obvious to me was that the new navigational tools didn't work as well as the old ones in this particular trick, because the old ones, like the map and the photo of the house, helped a lot, and the speedometer was pretty correct, but you can go to the next slide, the GPS did not work. And it gave the wrong miles an hour, and actually that's a reference to Back to the Future, and you had to go 88 miles an hour to get to the future, So, and the time wasn't registering at all, and the address appeared as the old address that was RD3, Rural Delivery 3. And there's obviously a real address now. So, so anyway, next. And then this is possible space, and so this is, I don't know if you noticed, but they're all houses, but this is an interior, obviously, and just want to talk for a minute about the symbolism of the house, because it's really interesting when you think about painting, and each room has its character. There's the living room, the dining room, the bedroom, bathroom, the attic, the basement. They all have a symbolism attached to them, and some of it could be personal symbolism, and some of it's more archetypal. It's more generally applied. And when you dream about a house, you could sometimes dream that you found a part of your house that you didn't know existed, or sometimes it's different from what you know it to be, or it looks particularly dark, or it's whatever. And then also the condition of a house is very symbolic. And so this house was, it was really like almost a shell, and it had to be completely renovated. And so I spent about a year or so with a friend, and this is me and him, renovating this house that he bought. And it was like, when I went back and looked at these photos, I realized it was very symbolic of our friendship at the time, because I think that we worked on improving a lot of things, and we just worked on some areas that were neglected and made things a lot better, especially with communication. And so, I think what was going on in the house was kind of going on in our friendship also. And it was also a time when we were just about to kind of embark on our lives as adults, and we were in our early 20s. And so, let's see, can you advance that a little bit? So there's a close-up. You can go on to the next. Okay, so I have the tools of his trade over here on his side, and he went on to rehab some more houses, and started a real estate business and became an urban developer. And then go on to the next slide. And then those are the tools of my trade. And but there's the painting within the painting. So what does that mean? So it's hinting at some conversations that we had as very young teenagers. We started talking about how we were going to rehab a house, and it was almost as if we assumed that we were going to do this. It was a very short conversation, but it was kind of a strange conversation, and so I guess the idea is that there, in any given time, there's the germ of the future in that time period. And then in this painting, in this room, the painting hasn't been painted yet, but there's the germ of the future, the painting in this room. So, is that okay? Next. So I'm just going to show you some sketches. So this is one of the first sketches I did, and I had us switched around so that we're kind of leaning towards each other. And then I thought, it looks too much like a couple, and it looks like we're, doing this together as a couple. And that wasn't really the idea that I had. It was more that we were going in different directions. So I switched around the figures so they were kind of leaning a little bit away from each other. And next. And then I'll just show you how I developed this. So I had this photo map that I did, and it was originally horizontal, and then I moved it closer and I made it vertical. Next. And then there's another layer, and I don't know if you noticed it on the painting, but there's another layer on top of the painting, and it's us now. And I wanted us to be looking through the picture plane and seeing ourselves when we were young. And so to do that, I stumbled on the surface to make it look like it's dusty, and then I left areas that you could see clearly through. So I had to paint the whole painting, let it dry, and then do that on top. And I selected the areas that I wanted you to see clearly, so that I made sure that they were areas that were I used the shadows of the figures and also the wiped out area that I was wiping out with my hand to be able to see, as those were the areas where you could see through. So let's just go back to the painting a minute. So you can, I don't know if you noticed the shadows there. Can you see them? Yeah, so they're not really that obvious. Okay, so we can advance all the way back. Sorry. So then, I'm starting to realize, everything I'm doing is really, even though you can break them up into these themes and things, they all kind of have, I'm always playing with time a little bit and putting figures in from different time periods. I'm always, even though they're different focuses, but I'm always using my family or friends as subjects and, people. I'm thinking, what am I doing with these paintings? And, they are cathartic, and they are, therapeutic, I guess, in a way. I think when everybody paints something that they really are interested in. But that's just for me, I don't want to do things for myself. I want to do things for other people. So to me, painting has a life and energy of its own, and it has the capacity to move people and change lives. So my feeling is, I put positive energy, if you listen to a wonderful piece of music, or you watch a wonderful movie, or read a novel that just really moves you. It's the same thing with art. You have this power to make a difference in with other people. So. So the next paintings that I'm going to show you are I'm very conscious of this. And so this one is the grandmother's, and it's obviously a self-portrait of me with my grandmothers. And my father's mother's on the left. And my mother always told me I looked like my grandmother's. I don't know if I really do, but whatever. They weren't the most beautiful women, but I liked their faces a lot. And my father's mother, her father was settled disputes in a town in Estonia, and he had a healing secret that he passed on to his daughter, my grandmother, and she felt that he used it too much and made it really common, and she didn't like that, and she didn't even feel like she was worthy to use it. But yet she was the kind of person where, that people would go to with their problems, and she was a great listener, and she made people calm, and she was healing people, she was having a good influence on them. And my maternal grandmother on the right, she had a very similar personality. I never knew my father's mother, but just from all the descriptions of her, I think my mother's mother was very similar in her personality, and her father was a Christian scientist, and he studied with Mary Baker Eddy. But he broke with her at a certain point because he felt that conventional medicine was also a factor in healing, and so he used it with faith to heal people. So anyway, so it was about my connection to my grandmothers, and you can go to the next slide. So I used these sepia photographs, but I colorized their arms more and more as they, as going down towards their hands and sort of connecting with me, so that they sort of came alive and came into the third dimension. I was going to have them sort of laying their hands on me, but then I thought, yeah, that's a little, too much, so I just put them on the chair. Next. So, perigee, a few years ago we had this really big supermoon, and my kids were, they were both going through some kind of, angst about something, and they were all, stressed out about stuff, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if the supermoon could just make you forget about everything and just, just relax and have tons of fun and just, let yourself go. And what would happen if my kids just let themselves go and, whatever. And immediately I thought that my daughter would dance in the moonlight with her favorite cat, and he was really his prince in disguise. And my son would become the mad violinist, and he'd start, serenading her and stuff. But I just had this image in my mind, and I pictured them. I made them on the dock in Maine, on the lake, and I had a lot of fun with that. And I put in a lot of symbolism from "Hey Diddle Diddle" just for fun, because some of it was there already, so I just kind of added to it. And next slide. That's a close-up. Next. There's a cat. Oh, and that's the opening pages of Moonlight Sonata in the music sheet. So, next. And this one, Yanni Payev, is, it means midsummer night, whatever. The summer solstice. It's called St. John's Eve, but it's Yanni Payev in Estonia. My daughter went to Estonia to do some studying, and she did some research on my father's early life. And she studied at the University of Tartu for a year, and she that was her favorite holiday, and they have a big bonfire and all kinds of stuff, and they stay up all night. And she was missing Estonia, so I wanted to make this a positive memory for her. So I imagined that, and also I associate my father with fire all the time, because I forgot to mention this, but when he was 3, he got burned, the lower part of his face, the skin was burned off, and his hands, and because he saw some coals in a fireplace and they were burning greenish because there was not enough oxygen. So he thought the color was so beautiful that he picked it up and put it in his apron. They had little aprons at the time, and it caught on fire and went up into his face. And he held, he saved his eyes, but his hands were burned, and his chin and everything. So, I always associate my father with that accident. It happened in Estonia when they still lived in Estonia. So, I think about fire a lot, and actually he once put out a fire that started in my hair when I blew out my birthday candle, so I didn't even think about that. I leaned over to blow out my birthday cake, and he went, and so, yeah, right, that could be a painting too. So anyway, so the fire's kind of going away from her, like a memory is sort of going away, and she's reaching out for it. Next. And this is about inspiration and how it's you're in the light, but it's also painful. And I find making these figurative paintings very painful, but in a great way. because it takes a really long time, and it's like a gestation period. When you know that there's this idea in you, and you just can't figure out how to put it down in a visual form, and it's like, it's just this, you can feel it inside you, and you just have to wait until it just, gets to the point where it's ready to be born. And so I have all these suggestions of paintings around, around me. I wanted to make them pretty subtle, but I'm not sure how they appear. But so it's just feeling of being, you're in the light, but you're still in pain, So, next. And this is a painting that is a little complex. I'm not sure I understand it yet, but I saw it, I had to paint it, and I changed the name of it. I had a different name before. But I decided it has a lot to do with communication, because it's about my brother and his friend from childhood who's here tonight. And they used to write each other letters. Do you mind me telling this at all? It's okay. All right. Okay. They used to write each other letters, and they had a secret symbol on the back that was a skull and crossbones, because they used to pretend that they were pirates. And they had all kinds of adventures as kids. And she had a boat, and they went on the boat and stuff. And the background is his island in Maine. But I thought about how it is to become, when you're mature, and you have to learn to communicate again, and it's a whole lifelong process. And they're still friends, and I think communication is really important. And there, in the background, there's Venus and the moon, and just coming up, and he's setting up his telescope, and he's between this really remote, symbol of a woman, Venus, and there's another woman here, his friend on the other side, and she's sort of in a world of her own, thinking, dreaming about something else, and he's kind of in the middle, and I wonder, like, what's he going to do? Who? And I think it's important to connect with real people. So I'm kind of thinking that way. But advance the slide one, and then there's a close up. You can see the little symbol. And then again, and then that owl is just a barred owl, but it used to live in the roof peak, but. But also, the owl is a symbol of wisdom, and there is this legend of the owl of Minerva, which is goddess of wisdom. And the owl of Minerva comes at the end of the day, so wisdom comes near the end of your life or later in life, and the day is waning. So I just wanted that going over the whole painting. Okay, next. We're getting near the end now. I started doing some larger paintings that were about things in the world, happening in the world, and this was in 2014, but I felt like there were so many awful things happening in the world. And, I was on Indian Island, my brother has a house in, and I thought, wow, what a great background for a painting, but I couldn't think of what to paint. And my brother is an amateur astronomer, loves, has a few telescopes. And so I decided I wanted to paint something going on in the sky that was something bad. And I made a black hole opening up in the Milky Way that shouldn't be there. And it's called event horizon, which is, the point where stars start to go into black hole and they can't come out again. So it's like the tipping point, But, there's this catastrophe that's happening, and we don't understand it, and some people are alarmed, some people are curious. My husband is on the right, he's trying to figure out where it is in the star book. It's kind of like, that's kind of typical. He just kind of gets involved in something, But I wanted everything pointing towards this black hole, and but then I have hope on each end. So my brother's mother is bringing out some tea, some hot tea, and she's saying, you know, there may be a catastrophe, but here's the tea. And on the other side of the painting, there's the I wish I had a pointer, but there's the Sagittarius constellation is nicknamed the teapot, and it tips. And there's like a little, see the star that's yellow, that's right behind my husband's head, and there's two on either side. That's the lid, and then there's the spout that's going like this, and then the Milky Way is like the steam coming out of the teapot. And so what I'm trying to say is that the tea is creating hope, and that new stars are being formed all the time as something else, you know, something bad is getting sucked into the black hole. So, okay, so that's that. Keep going on. I had some good, I put in some of my photo maps, and I was playing with different ideas. So I have all kinds of things. This was really disorganized. This was at the beginning. I couldn't figure out what to do. And I had my great nephew in there. And he loves to draw, so I wanted him drawing the event, and then he was standing in the foreground, and I didn't want to move him back too far because it was not, I should have made this painting bigger. It was too small. And I loved his face so much, I couldn't bear making that small. So I kept moving him around. Next slide, I moved him to the other side. It's like, well, no, it still doesn't work because he's looking in the wrong direction and everything's disorganized. But I was sort of getting this other part organized. Next slide. And then I finally made this sketch, drawing, and I kind of figured out where I wanted everything to point, and I was kind of getting myself together, under control. You know, okay, you have to have a focal point, and things have to point to it, and you know. So I started thinking about it, and then you can go to the next slide. So that's the final photo map that I used to lay out the painting. And by the way, I don't paint from these photo maps. I just lay it out that way, and I grid the canvas, and I grid the map, and then I paint usually from, for these big ones, I paint from the monitor. Use the monitor to paint the details. It's much more, you know, a lot more information. So, okay, next. And then Triumph of Light. This was right after the 2016 election, and you can't really see it because actually there's some sky in there, and it's all, you know, it's just blurred out. You can't really see that side of it, but you can see more over there. So I started thinking about, I went to a solstice party where there's a big bonfire, because I love bonfires and I love firelight, and I started thinking about, you know, how a phoenix could come from the ashes. So, you know, even in the darkest part of the year, there could be some rebirth. And so, you know, I just thought this guy, well, I don't want to go into the whole story, but he was such a great guy. He jumped so high, and his cousin took pictures for me that were like 6 frames a second. I couldn't do it at that time because it was too dark, but I set up a photo shoot later, and he was great. Next slide. It was based on John Singer Sargent's El Jaleo, and in a loose way. What I loved about this painting is there's these musicians playing, and you can sort of hear them in a way. You know, even though you can't hear them, they're kind of, you know, you feel like there's a crescendo happening towards this dancer, and then at the end, that woman with the red dress kind of stops her from going off the right end of the painting. You know. On to the next slide. So I put a row of musicians in, you know, on that side, so I had them jump in after that point. It's loosely based, but it gave me this idea, and I really like doing that. And that guy, let's see, so this is my husband, my son, and their friends, and then this guy here is Wally, who's in the plaster painting, and that's his daughter. So he appears in the other painting. And then next slide, that's another detail. And then next slide, this is in the foreground, and it's sort of important because this is my friend Alice Grunt, and she's an artist also, and her son, and she's saying there's a choice. You can be a phoenix. You can you know, be reborn from fire and use the fire as a transformation, or in her other hand, she's got, you can hardly see it, it's a fire salamander. And it's black with yellowy orange, like kind of swirly markings on it. And it lives in damp, hollow logs and things in the forest. And if you put a log in the fire, it'll crawl out and go back into the forest and hide in the damp, dampness, find dampness. But the myth around it was that it survived the fire, but actually it just escaped the fire. So there are different ways to deal with fire. You can think of it as an enemy, or you can think of it as a transformative power. So, and on again. This is called Limbo, and a friend of mine posed for this, and it's about making a decision that's difficult, and it's between two things that are not that different, or may not be that different, but it's hard to know. And it's also between emotion and reason. Sometimes you get caught in between those things when you're making a decision, and it's hard to see clearly. So, he's just trying to walk the line. It's like a lifeline, but the two elements on either side of him are not solid. They're water and air. So, and the next slide. But when I was working on it, I had to turn it to work on the water and air. And so then I realized I liked it sideways too. And then I couldn't decide which way it went. And so I'm going to make it be able to be hung two different ways. So, next. And then this is my last slide, but our last painting I'm going to show. It's also a very large painting, Scavengers. And it started when I got the idea when an author decided to write a biography of my father's life. And it was not just about his work, it was a personal biography. And so we all had to participate, giving her information. We didn't have to, but we realized if we didn't participate, she could also write about us. So we could either try to give her information, or we could stay out of it and then be totally, not involved, but then she could write whatever she wanted. I mean, she could write whatever she wanted anyway. It was kind of nerve-wracking, the whole experience, to have because it was our lives too, that were being made public, and we weren't sure what she's going to write. So there's the book down in the corner there, the left-hand corner. But so I asked my siblings, how do you feel? How does this make you feel? And also the reviews came out, and the reviews, a lot of reviewers don't read things very carefully. A lot of them had their own agendas, and they were, saying these things that were kind of outrageous and upsetting, and we didn't know how to take them. So I asked my siblings how they felt, and they all told me how they felt, and I tried to put those emotions into the painting. And so this is, me, my brother, and my sister. And we're all trying, the wall behind us is dissolving, and so, our interior space is dissolving, and these seagulls, these scavengers are coming in and, just kind of invading our private space. They're pooping on the floor. They're, taking our cell phones, and they're taking one has my father's tie. You can advance the slide a little bit. See the detail of, I didn't know that was going to be there. That's interesting. Okay, you can go again. Yeah, this one. I was thinking. So one of them grabbed one of my father's ties from the drawer, and my sister's trying to close the drawer, and she's trying to hold on to the letters, and one of the gulls got a letter, and of course the gull pooped as it was flying off, and there's one of them's reading the book. And so I realized it was more than just us being invaded, but we're all being invaded. Our privacy is being invaded by all kinds of electronic things, So a lot of people have this high level of anxiety today because, they don't know what's private and what's not. I mean, probably nothing is that private anymore. So next slide. So this is Lolly, and my friend Lee here lent me her stuffed gull that she inherited from an artist, right? Another artist. And she was a he, He or she, we don't know. He, okay. He was very helpful to me because I got a lot of the goals. Okay. Oh, okay. So yeah, we don't know. Okay. Well, let's just say it's he. So on the internet, I got a lot of the goals on the internet, but that works when they're far away, and I'm looking for certain positions and flying things and goals that they're in motion and things like that. But when they're close up, I wanted to use as accurate a reference as I could. So I, for the close-up goals, I moved Lolly into different positions and used his face, and I kind of morphed his mouth a little bit to make him look more evil, or his eyes, and it was just useful for the feathers also. And in fact, the one reading the book is done completely from Lolly, from life. That was fun. So he was a wonderful guest. He just behaved himself really well. He didn't poop on anything. Yeah, he was good. Stayed in my studio for several weeks. Next slide. So I'm just showing you like the progress. You can just go through these pretty fast. I was working on my sister because she wouldn't pose. She doesn't like to pose, so I had to use my own body and her head, and I couldn't get them together. So you can kind of see how I'm struggling with this. In the next slide, I think I finally got her. I realized I had to be a little more dramatic with my position. It's always tricky when you're doing these things because you don't want to show too exaggerated. You don't want the movements to be too exaggerated because then it looks like an ad or something like an illustration. But you don't want it to be too subtle because then it doesn't get across emotion. So that's when it's getting towards being finished. I had a lot more goals to paint, but okay, next. So I'm just going to give you some of my favorite references, and I also have, if anyone's interested in them, I have a reading list. Not that you have to be reading what I'm reading, but in case you're interested. So I think everybody, if they're going to attempt this kind of thing, needs a book of symbolism. And this is a great, it's well organized, and it has symbols from every culture and everything, and it's all listed in alphabetical order, and it's a really well done book. Next. So some of my favorite books about Jung or by Jung, Manager's Symbols was one that I read when I was really young, and there's a great biography that was more recent, Joseph Campbell, Power Myth, and Meeting the Shadow is a series of essays that's really interesting. Also, Robert A. Johnson wrote a bunch of little tiny books, and they're real easy to read. Has anyone seen the book, the movie The Reader? Do you remember that book? You remember that. So if you read that book, and if you read the Fisher King myth, you'll see a whole new side of that movie, which was a book, actually, before it was a movie. It's just a really interesting, he writes about relationships and men and women. Next. And these are some books that I had when I was a kid, and I still read them, for fairy tales and mythology. And then next. This is a book that my daughter really likes. It's an annotated Brothers Grimm, but you could just get Brothers Grimm fairy tales and have a book of fairy tales. Because this has a lot of extra stuff in it. Next. Okay, so I just want to end with just some thoughts. So, my feeling is when I work, I try to find the essence of the idea, and I want to pare down the visual image. Like if I think about Wyatt, he's a great example because we did many studies, and you have things in the painting that are in the sketches, and then you take them out, and then you would keep paring it down, and the final painting hardly had anything in it, but it said what he wanted to say. So, my feeling is I take that as a really good example of, taking the extra stuff away and making a stronger image and really asking you to be honest with yourself about it. And also, I try to let the idea sit for a while and not rush into the painting before I really know what it's about. Not just on the surface, but the more profound meaning of it. And so I keep going deeper, and the more you go deeper, the more it connects with other people because you're getting to the meaning that is more universal. Next slide. And then I really believe there's an aspect of visual art that is not at all visual, and you know, it just can't be seen with the eye, even though you're painting this visual thing. But you feel it, and you perceive it, obviously, because you're getting it, but you just don't see it. It's generated by what you're seeing, but it's not visible. And I think as we go deeper into the idea, and we try to find its essence, that we're also tapping into that unseen aspect of visual art. So that is my end of my presentation. So I hope you heard. Oh yeah, so if anyone, I didn't want to, stand up here and show them, but these are some of my photo maps. This is how I work and how I design the paintings. So if you want to look at them in person, you can. You don't have to, it's not that important, but if you want to, you can look at them. And then, as I said, when I'm actually painting, I don't really use them anymore. I just use them to design the paintings. So you can, I'll just put it on the floor. And then also, I mentioned that, so that, again, this is the books that I mentioned. There, so if anyone's interested in, yes, you can pass it around if you're interested in, having the titles or anything. Are there any questions? Yes.
When you say you paint with a monitor, how do you get your colors? What's the image on the monitor showing if you did this first? I'm confused about.
Okay, so I put together my paintings from, I take photos of the people and I arrange them. So I have all those photos in my computer. So I know which ones I, use that I'm going to use for the painting. So I just, pull up those photos and I work from that.
Even though one person may be from another figure, this person from the, and you can get the color?
Because I've already transferred this map onto my canvas. I have the figures drawn out, and I have it, and I don't just do line drawing or anything like that. I actually do like a first wash of color. So I have a general idea of, the composition and the colors. And then as I develop each figure, I use the monitor. And when I'm taking reference photos, I make sure that the lighting is all consistent with all the reference photos. And also, of course, when you're designing the background and you want the figures to fit into that background, you also have to think about the perspective and the horizon line. And you have to be able to put the figures in correctly so that they are, the perspective is right. So if you're going to take the photos yourself, you want to all be standing for all of them, or all sitting for all of them, or whatever. But you have to be at the same height from the ground for when you're taking all the reference photos for a particular painting.
The wish, your storyboard earlier, the wish.
This one?
You posed all of your, when you took the reference photos, they were all a certain way towards this handle.
Yes, in this one, I didn't use a cake. I used a bunch of those little votive candles, and I put them on a plate. And so I went to different people's houses, and I said, okay, we're going to do this votive candles, and I would light a whole bunch of them, and then they would pose. So the light is always coming from the center of the painting. And so, I could just take different pictures of different people and then put them together. I just had to make sure if there was a shadow on somebody, I made sure that I put it in. Yes.
You had said in the scene with the bonfire with the guy jumping that you were not able to photograph him jumping at that time.
Mm-hmm.
How did you recreate that incredible scene?
Okay, so it was too dark. He just was a blur. So I went back to their house, and he's a cousin of the son, the photographer. He's my son's age, and so he was there, visiting or something, and so he came over. They both were over, and we put some kind of like a floodlight or something on the ground facing up, so it was like a fire, and then there was a little dip in the landscape, and so he kept jumping over the thing, and every time he jumped, David would take a photograph in 6 frames a second. And so I got lots and lots of photos, and I just picked the one I liked, but the light was coming from the right direction, and it was just after dusk, or just at dusk, so there was no light from it was just a little bit bluish light from the sky, but it was enough light to be, fine for stopping the action like it. So
It's just amazing how you get the sense of light on all these different people to be so believable, and
Mhm.
I can't even imagine.
well, it just is a matter of making sure it's consistent. If you're going to create this painting, it has to be the same. The light has to come from the same direction for everybody.
But
Um,
I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
a fire throws different kind of light than
Mhm.
floodlight. So how does that translate?
Well, because the dusk was so blue, in the photograph, that the light, we'll make sure it's a warm light, but it just translated very similarly to fire. And I could always add, I could make the color a little bit more warm, well, as I'm painting. But it was convincing, it worked, yeah. Yes, Natalie.
Yeah, first, thank you so much. It was just a wonderful presentation. It's very cool.
Thank you.
So the thing that I'm thinking about, and I'm not really sure how to formulate the question, but it's like the relationship between symbols that are universal and that are archetypes, and then symbols that are really personal to you or to whoever paints them that I wouldn't have known about if you didn't tell me. So there's a lot of symbolism that's really individual, and I guess I'm more used to seeing, maybe because I don't know, but looking at paintings that, let's say it's a mythical thing, it's biblical, or it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
So that the myth, Adam and Eve, we know about the apple or the snake, but in yours they're very personal stories. So what is the question I'm asking? I guess, are you concerned at all that if the people don't know the personal symbolism to you, that do you think it matters in the
No,
painting?
I mean, not to me. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me. I'm telling you all this just because I'm telling you how I create these paintings. But, if you were just looking at my painting, I wouldn't really care whether you knew it or not. You could ask me, but I want people to get whatever they want to get out of those paintings. So, it doesn't really matter if they know all the things I was thinking of, or if they just think of some stuff of their own. It's great. I love hearing people coming up with an alternative story, because obviously it means something to them. So I think sometimes with that, that unseen part of visual art, that you're communicating something to people that's not visible, but then it gets translated differently for different people, to different people, So I don't mind at all.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I don't-
hearing
yeah.
the stories.
I don't
love
want to
looking at the
dictate.
paintings.
Yeah, I don't want to dictate that this is how you must see it. So, yes.
In reference to you wanting it to be like an illustration. So
Yeah.
what is the difference in your mind between what's an illustration,
Yeah.
what's what you're doing, or what is
Yeah, I guess, an illustration is it's usually you're responding to an author that's writing something, and you are trying to be faithful to what the author is writing and make it come alive in a picture. Sometimes I feel like, actually, I was talking to Joe Crush a lot, and he's telling me how, they used to work together, and they would go through the book, and they would write it down, everything that they thought would be really make a great illustration, and then they would compare notes, and they usually hit on a lot of the same things. And then they would go through the book, also they would look at the details of the people and make sure that everything was accurate so that the illustrations matched what the author intended. And now I know not all illustrators do that, but I think to me that's kind of the job of an illustrator, because they're commissioned to make this book and to have some visual, accompaniment. So to me that's more like a commission portrait, but I'm sure other illustrators feel very differently about that. And but it's also, you're appealing to, I guess there's just, I haven't really thought about it, to tell you the truth, in depth, because I guess by the time I started painting these figurative paintings, I was so far from doing these illustrations that I didn't even have to compare them to illustrations, but I had to sort of bounce off portraits more, because I was trying to get away from, or I was trying to differentiate, actually not get away from portraits, but differentiate from portraits. So I haven't really given a lot of thought beyond that. Yeah.